Hi, it's Videos back at you for another video. This is going to be part 2 of my show to comic comparison for season 6. So last video we ended on episode 10, so this video we're going to start right there. So 6:10, the next world. Now there was a time skip in the TV show during the rebuilding of Alexandria and Carl's healing, which was actually covered in the comics. So this is a huge difference from what happened in the comics because the arcs that were covered in the comic book was not shown in the TV show. Then the first encounter with Jesus was also different in the TV show than the comics as well. In the comics, Abraham and Michonne were the first to encounter Jesus, and Rick was notified once Jesus held them hostage. But in the show, Jesus was a bit friendlier, and his first encounter with the group was with Rick and Daryl. The arc where he steals the supplies and the truck from Daryl and Rick is just for the show. But he is taken back to Alexandria the same way. So the comic book and the TV show end up in the same place. Jesus is taken back to Alexandria anyway. Then Michonne and Rick's relationship is also exclusive to the TV show. But there are some scenes that mirror Rick and Andrea's relationship in the comics. So they're similar in that aspect. Then the next episode, 6:11, Knots Untied. So this is the episode that has more of a comic material covered in it. So much like the comics, Jesus talks to the group and convinces them to follow him to the hilltop. And in both cases, Jesus is not trusted immediately by Rick and company. So in that aspect, it's similar. But then in the comics, Jesus breaks out of his cuffs in an attempt to gain Rick's trust. But the scene wasn't covered in the TV show. It was actually done in another way. There was also the plan to save the members of the Hilltop, which was just for the show, and it wasn't done in the comic book. Then the introduction of the Hilltop in the TV show was identical to the comic book. It was like an exact replication. And Gregory's introduction in the show was also the same way. It was identical. It was a replication of what happened in the comic book. And also, following that same path, Gregory getting stabbed, then Rick killing Ethan and saying what? That famous what line? And also Jesus telling the group about Negan and the Saviors was identical to the comics as well. So that was a replication as well. So this is another one of those episodes that covered a lot of the comic material. So it was basically a direct adaptation of what happened in the comic book. And then last thing in this episode is Maggie's negotiation with Gregory. It was also exclusive to the TV show. The negotiations didn't exactly involve Maggie in the comic book, but in the TV show, Maggie was at the forefront of this negotiation with Gregory. Then the next episode, 6:12, Not Tomorrow Yet, the events leading to getting to the outpost was also for the show only. So basically, getting the head, going to the outpost, saying, this is Gregory's head, and then attacking. That was just for the show as well. And also in the same way, the whole attack was also for the show as well, because the Savior's outpost was never attacked at this point. Also, the ending where we find Carol and Maggie are taken hostage is also for the show only, and they're never taken hostage by the Saviors. Then the next episode, 6:13, The Same Boat, which is a follow-up of the hostage situation. So that's also exclusive to the show. And basically the entire episode is something that wasn't done in the comic book. The only similarity is the line that one of the ladies at that outpost says, which is, "We are all Negan." And that was actually done, but earlier. I believe it was when the motorcycle game came along and they actually said that line. But aside from that, everything else from this episode is basically exclusive to the show. Then the next episode, 614, twice as far. So Carol sneaking out of the safe zone and running into Saviors was not done in the comics, so that was just for the show as well. But Eugene and Abraham did go on a patrol run and did find a facility for Eugene to craft ammunition in the comics as well. But the aftermath and the setup for that was different, but it was similar. Then Daryl, Denise, and Rosita leaving for a supply run was exclusive to the show as well, and it wasn't done at all in the comic book. But Abraham's death in the comics was swapped with Denise's death, but was done in the same way. So the death was the same, but it was just swapped. So this was a replication, but with a different character. Then Eugene being captured by Dwight, and the conclusion of that scene was identical in the comics as well, but it was done at a different location. It was done at the Alexandra safe zone, not in the woods. But that's a replication as well because it was very, very much like what happened in the comics. And then last thing, Eugene wasn't shot in the comics, so Dwight shooting, or one of the saviors shooting Eugene was just for the show as well. So this episode had quite a decent amount of comic material as well, but it wasn't anywhere close to what we saw in Knots Untied or No Way Out or Start to Finish. Then the next episode, 615, called East. So basically nothing in this episode that I can think of was done in the comic, so everything was new as well. So Carol's confrontation with the Saviors and her escape was never done in the comics. Morgan and Rick searching for Carol wasn't done in the comics, it was just a show. Daryl seeking revenge for Denise's death wasn't done in the comics. Then Michonne, Rosita, and Glenn going after him, it was just for the show as well. Rick and Morgan running into one of the members of the Kingdom, and Morgan later meeting more members when Carol was shot, that was just for the show as well. In the same way, Carol getting shot was just for the show as well. Rosita, Daryl, Glenn, and Michonne getting captured by Dwight wasn't done in the comics. It was exclusive to the show as well. And also, along the same way, Daryl getting shot was just for the show. Then, the last episode, the season finale, 616, Last Day on Earth. So, Maggie getting sick and the group trying to get her to the hilltop to get help for her condition, it was just for the show as well. It wasn't done in the comics. It was just a way for them to be put in the same position as they were in the comics. So they just added this in to push them forward to that scene, or to that encounter with Negan. Then the group getting confronted by Negan and the Saviors was done in the comics as well, and it was basically the exact same way without the setup. So there was no roadblocks in the comics, nothing of that sort. It was just they were getting to the hilltop, they stopped, and then they were attacked. But it was similar. And then Negan's introduction was identical to the comics. Even the dialogue was exactly the same. So that was a direct adaptation of what happened in the comic book, except they did the cliffhanger, which wasn't done in the comic book. But aside from that, everything else was the same. So this was another episode where there was some comic material done, but not as close as the others that I mentioned. So when we look at the whole season, we can see the amount of comic material covered in the entire season, and it's like 4 episodes only that had a lot of comic material. And based on this, and based on Greg Nicotero's interview about season 7 and saying that they're going to stay away from the comics for season 7, I believe him. He's not just doing that to make us think that it's not going to happen, but it's actually going to happen. I think there's some truth to that, and I think season 7 we're going to see a lot less comic material than we're used to, and it's going to be a fun season even for comic readers because of the amount of non-comic material that are probably going to be covered. So let me know what you think about, this season and, the amount of comic material covered in it. Is there anything I missed? Is there anything I did wrong or I didn't talk about? Uh, Let me know in the comment section. Also, share your thoughts about season 7 and how much comic material you think is going to be covered in season 7. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back for another video.